Call the meeting to order.
All right. Joe Becker.
Here.
Andy Bertram here. Dan Cater.
Here.
Scott Gergen.
Here.
Lisa Dean.
Here.
Russ Roloff.
Here.
Vince O'Brien.
Here.
Superintendent Collins.
Here.
Do we have a motion to approve tonight's agenda?
So move.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. And a motion to approve the minutes of the May 25th, 2016 regular board meeting.
I'll motion.
Second. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. And the bills payable.
I'll motion.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
And we can cut to Tim's report.
Yeah, do the focus for the gym too. I'm gonna start out with something that's not on my report, and that's just our high school gymnasium project. And there's a couple of photos that Deanna will pull up. But as I'm talking about that, one of the things that, when we looked at the project, there were two things that were going on. One was to resurface all of the wood courts. And then we had some water leakage a couple of years ago underneath the lower doors on the far, what would that be, west end? On the far west end. And as we all know with water, where does it come from? Did it come underground? Did it come off the sidewalls? Did it come through the door? You know, how do you prove that? And so a couple of months ago, we approved a bid saying, you know, our facilities committee had met on this, saying you never really know till you start, you know, tearing into it. And so the company gave a bid at so much a square foot, saying, you know, we think it's going to be 600 square feet that you're going to have to pull up, but when we get into this, it might be more. And so we originally were estimating the gym floor overall to be at around that $200,000 mark, and that's with the resurfacing too. We were under that amount, but now we're going to be right near.
Oh, okay.
We're going to be right near that amount,
I'm
and of
just
course.
smiling at the
Yeah.
choice of
Yeah.
background on this particular
So I'm
slide.
just to show you, and of course, because we're televised, to show some of the community as well. This was a picture from yesterday. As we've never taken down the floor. We've always done maintenance on it and did a light sand and a seal coat on the floor. But now it's time to take it all the way down. And we met with staff on where should lines be painted, what other type of physical activities do you now do on the floor that we weren't doing 15 years ago, how many lines do we want on the floor. So we went through that process as well. And you can see one of the fire door areas that, you know, we're talking about, that's where, in fact, that was where we felt most of the leakage was to begin with. And if you ran around the track on that corner, if you hit a spot, you knew it. It was spongy, and so that's how we first knew that we had some problems. So then, if you ever want to see what a floor looks like, it's basically on cement where they put down poly. The poly has worked very well because there was still moisture trapped underneath the poly, but there was also moisture then on top of the poly. So you know, where does the leak come from? But it's basically a plywood on top of that plastic with another subfloor plywood, and then the gym floor. And as for those of you who have been up in the athletic complex, we have courts that are wood, and then on this far end we have the rubberized synthetic type of surface in addition to the track. This then was, to our surprise, as you can see where they went out and they originally took out to right here, and they're like, oh no, we still see, you know, water underneath. So then they started to cut out some holes, and they kept cutting out the holes until they didn't see any more water. And that's of course now where the project's now going to get bigger than what we had anticipated.
Does that mean it did stop before it got to the sand?
Right, it's right it's right there.
Okay.
Knock on wood, pardon that pun too, but it is right there. And, you know, the other, I don't know if there are any more photos or not, but then this is again just some of the other project of them, you know, stripping it down.
Is there anything that's reusable from what you took off?
No.
Is that all just shot?
Yeah, because those plies are usually glued together, and when you start to rip them up,
So even area where you didn't think it was wet, it was still
yes,
damaged?
right.
Okay.
So,
It looked like there was still like color like between the courts, you know, and that's gonna be like completely resurfaced as well, isn't it? Because our royal blue kind of faded to light green.
yes, part of it,
Yeah,
part of it's to be repainted, the
okay.
track as well to be repainted. So the good news is it's still coming in right where when our facility committee had met, where we originally had somewhat projected. I shouldn't say somewhat, we had thrown out a number where we projected. You know, the bad news is our original bid, if it would have been that, would have been about $50,000, you know, less. And one of the things I called Scott McQueen from Wold, and he sent Nick down to look at it with an engineer eye. And they're gonna be coming down again next week and talking about some other things that we can do. He believes that Steve Yans has done a good job of diverting the water from pooling on those backside of those doors. At one time, it was pretty flat. And what happened, then water was coming down off the roofs from the corners, going around and pooling right in front of that door, and some of it was coming in there. We also believe that the doors have settled over time, and then you get the gappage underneath the doors, and if you get a heavy rain with a heavy wind, then you have that water coming in and the floor is right there. So Scott's going to come down and talk with Steve Yans and Jim about what are some other things that we can maybe do to make sure that the water, you hate to replace the floor and then have it come right back in.
Yeah, I wonder if there'd be a way to do, like I've seen at some bigger department stores where there's almost like a trap, you walk in and there's like a mesh grid, and then there's a
Concrete
trap
box.
there, and those grids, you can take them out, and then, you know, it's for grit and sand and all that stuff. You know, it's
Mhm.
for a high traffic door, but might work for something like this, just in case.
Yeah, I think one of the problems on that end is our track.
Goes right up to
Comes
that
real
end.
close.
Yeah, you're coming right close to that door.
Mm.
They do have a catch basin, so to speak, not too far from that door. Scott also talked about, what did he call it, a French drain, which is kind of a fake drain.
It's like
so
it's a tile, drain
tile
tile.
system.
Like you
But
use
Steve
for-
doesn't think that's the problem. He believes that since we've regraded it and asphalted it away, that the pooling does go far enough away. Steve did agree with Nick from Wold, who came down, that the doors now, because of the settling, are probably where the water is coming in. And that's a correctable problem as well that we need to then get on right away. So that's one of the things I just wanted to update. Tied into that is the tennis courts at the high school site. Just wanted to let you know that we have moved forward and it's completed now. We had some pretty big cracks on our tennis courts, and they've been now filled within the last 2 weeks, so that project's moving forward. Also want to share that we've had great collaboration with the Hastings Tennis Association. They've been really go-getters in these last few years, not only willing to paint youth lines on the court, but they're also willing to take our storage shed, which was due to be replaced, and they are willing to pay for the extra to make it bigger for their equipment and youth equipment as well. So in talking with the Hastings Tennis Association, I told them that if to replace the shed, for example, is $8,000 typically for us, that we would front the $8,000, and if they want to make it bigger and store their stuff, they cover the rest. And so I just want to say thank you to the Hastings Tennis Association for their great collaboration and everything they're helping us with on the courts as well. Just want to tie in then a little bit about the technology director position, assistant combination. I talked to you very lightly about it at a work session. We have moved forward. I have made that decision to move forward with that, basically with Missy Williams taking that leadership role and then us trying to free up some of her current duties that she's doing. And we met with Pam Hoffman, who has worked with food service, and we're going to go that route. We're about 4 hours out of her day, are an assistant to take away some of the duties from Missy. What that means then is that we'll look at Missy's job description, we'll add those duties, and then we'll send it into Bob Bjorklund, and then we'll come back with you on what that pay equity and comp worth of that position should be. Again, I would say it's the conservative approach rather than hiring a full-time technology director at a time when we've cut $900,000. But I also wouldn't be recommending it if I didn't think that it was a good decision at this time. And then ties, Infinite Campus Training, just want to, they kind of go hand in hand. Missy has been leading that effort too, which is going to be a lot of work for a lot of our staff to get everybody trained now, as we have to go to a new student information system. And a lot of that core training will start the week of July 11th through the 15th. And thank you to all of our staff members who, they really don't have a choice. That's the week when Infinite Campus is doing the training. We told them in advance they can't take a vacation that week. They have to come in and they have to get trained. And so I want to say thank you publicly to all of our staff who recognize, hey, this is just what you have to do. We've also gone to a new transition of training because we really didn't have any alternative. We opened it up to any teachers in August who wanted to get trained early on some early dates. And then we said that for coming in, because we couldn't afford to pay everybody for coming in, then if they come in early in August, then that welcome back week, they can leave early on one of those days. And so we believe that that's going to be the best way. It's going to help us with training too, so that we're not training 300 teachers all at the same time. So that's going quite well. We've had some direct discussions with ties. As you know, over the last year, what are you going to have to pay ties if you're leaving? What are you going to have to pay ties for information that you still want to access and data that you still want to access that is your data that you've paid to put onto their system? And I'm happy to say that ties listened, and I believe they came up with a fair approach where we don't have to pay for an entire year like they, I don't want to say threatened, but they felt that we were going to have to do. And I believe that they came up with a fair system that says if you still need to look at some of that information through August, September, October, then you pay 25% of what you would have had to pay for the year. And I think that is fair. I think one of the things that's going to be discussed here by superintendents in the very near short term is that when they have their annual meeting, they shared with me in that phone conference call that if you look to leave ties now, you have a liability fee that you have to pay, that you're going to have to pay. And it's $80 per student. And at $4,500 per student, 4,500 students at $80 a student. And over the phone, of course, I wasn't talking to the main person, I was talking to the messenger. So the phone just kind of went silent in our phone conference call for a while, and I just said, I feel like I'm being held hostage here. Where did you come up with this number? This isn't in any of the documentation. Well, if you go back to some of the documentation from 30 years ago and 35 years ago, in general terms, it lightly talks about that the districts who come into this partnership together, if they would leave, you just couldn't leave without paying your portion of the old liability. So apparently somebody at ties has done a mathematical analysis that there's millions of dollars of liability and it's worth $80 per student. And this has not been shared yet with all the superintendents of ties.
But some of that liability that's recent with ties might be due to the big kerfuffle that they had over the last couple of years.
Ties owns their own liability.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not their members.
Yeah.
I mean.
But lawyers, I assume, would resolve that.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, so, yeah.
So just to let you know, I feel on one end, they've come up with a very workable solution that is fair to us as we're transitioning off. And Missy.
Well, how quickly do we need to transition off so that we're never held to the $80 a student?
Well, that was my question of, when does this go into effect? And they said it's always, that's what she shared with me, well, it's always been in effect in their mind. But nobody, no school district has ever been told this amount of what you're going to owe. And just so West St. Paul, I knew that they were looking to leave ties. I did call their superintendent and say, are you leaving or aren't you leaving? And she said, oh, we're going to stay now. I think the cost of staying isn't that bad overall. And I said, well, you're aware that if you do leave a year from now, and they've got, I think, 5,200 students. And she said, no, she was not aware of that. And so just, ties continues to be a discussion point for a lot of school districts in the metro area. So I just wanted to.
Is that in the contract?
Well, see, they couldn't even show us the contract, at one point in time. So this is something that they found from 30 years ago. So.
Well, I hope the new executive director there reviews this tape and hears me saying, as a solid ties supporter over the years, that I think we need to look at aggressively leaving ties if they're gonna keep with that policy. Otherwise, they might want to think about ditching that policy in a hurry and telling people that.
Yeah, so I know that, and especially you, Dan, because you're in that technology world and you know some of the people who work with some of the contracts on the the wireless side of it. I knew that some of this might get back to you at some point, and that's another reason for sharing it now. But I believe that what usually happens is when you sit down, as you said, Dan, with a group of superintendents and board members asking, why is this the direction that you're going, that may change down the road as well. So good news on the one end that they're fair to us. We are going to still have to look at some of that data over time. And so I'm glad that they're fair on that cost amount, and that's my superintendent report.
I wasn't talking too much out of turn. I was using Google Earth to look at the exterior of the high school where the water was coming by and then the tennis courts.
Okay.
So you can use that real quick if you want to look at the areas. Now we go to the action items, and the first one is some good news. You've had successful negotiations with 3 different contract groups.
Yes, and always very good discussion. The discussion usually, and I'll talk to you later on in negotiations when we close the meeting, usually 30% of it is on the financial side of it, because the groups appreciate the fact that the board is fair to all groups, and that what the board offers other groups percentage-wise that the board offers are hourly as well. And then the other 70% of the discussion is usually just how we operate and procedures and how we communicate with their group, etc. And so, this reflects exactly what we had proposed, and that is the 2% for the upcoming year and the 1.75% for the following year, and these 3 groups have signed off at this time. I typically really want to get all contracts settled by July 1st, because it takes off a lot of workload and pressure from our business office staff that doesn't have to do then retro in August and September. And I haven't been as successful this go around on getting the other groups. So very happy that we can bring forward these 3 under the parameters that you as a board had set.
And I know it takes 2 to tango, so much appreciation to all the representatives from all those groups. Can we do one motion for all 3?
Yes.
Then somebody willing to?
I just want to note that I think the agenda has the wrong dates in it, but that the contracts have 16
I
to
see
18,
what you're saying, yeah.
and the agenda still has 14 to 16.
Not anymore, I just gonna send it.
So does somebody want to
I'll motion.
motion the amendment with the correct dates,
I
which
didn't see
is
that before.
16, 18? Right?
A second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Next up, 917's long-term facility maintenance program budget.
Yes, this is very new to even Kim and I, so even for you new board members, the long-term facility maintenance revenue is a new levy that the state authorized. I applaud them for authorizing it. And it also combines in the smaller health and safety projects as a revenue stream, along with what, would you say capital stream too, Ken?
It's the old deferred maintenance.
Old deferred maintenance and the health and safety smaller.
Yeah, and then an increase.
Yeah, and then it's going to be increasing over time. And so 917, we have some responsibility at 917 too, for their facilities as well, and their health and safety as well. So this first action item is us as a board acknowledging that we need to levy that amount to cover their costs. And so Kim and I are recommending approval at this time.
I'll make the motion.
Second, excuse me.
Any discussion on this one? And we have to do a roll call vote?
Joe Becker,
Yes?
Andy Bertram, yes. Dan Cater.
Yes.
Scott Gergen.
Yes.
Lisa Hadeen.
Yes.
Russ Roloff.
Yes.
Vince O'Brien.
Yes. I guess I should have asked this earlier. If their ability to levy automatically becomes like our ability to levy for this, what kind of a percentage on the tax base will their portion of the levy be? And I don't need an exact number, just like, is it more than 1%? Is it more than 5%?
I should know that because we talked about that, but we didn't talk about it in those percentage terms.
Yeah. Or is it just,
Well, I think I want to characterize it as small, just because, it's basically Hastings' portion of that consortium's facilities, some of which are sometimes in the districts themselves, so.
I know what you're asking,
yeah.
and I'll follow up on that. Yeah.
Okay. And
That's a
we
good
can
question.
talk about it in December when we do
Yeah.
it. Yeah. Okay.
But
Yep. Okay.
I get what you're asking overall.
And now our own 10-year long-term facility maintenance revenue plan.
Again, I shared with you in an email that typically the state of Minnesota would have this plan on their website. And so it's always crazy working with the state where they want a plan submitted and yet they don't even have the format. And yet we have guidelines that we have to follow. So, of course, as you know, Kim, tremendous follow through. She had in your packets the continued long-term facility maintenance plan. And really, the 10-year plan, the main thing that whenever you look at that long-term facility maintenance plan is just usually the next year, the year that we're in and the next year. Because to project out for sure what we're gonna do for sure, the second year, the third year, the fourth year. And also, to remind you that when you look at that 10-year plan, we have more needs than what's on that plan. And this is where superintendents argued with the state on this law a little bit, was that we should be able to show to the public, we have more needs than what we're putting out there. But the law is that you can only put on that 10-year plan what the amount is that your dollars would cover. So they give us so many dollars on this plan per student, and so whatever those dollars cover, then we have to say that our expenditures are gonna match perfectly over the 10 years, you know what I mean? So Kim and I know that we're presenting a plan to you that says, hey, this is our long-term facility maintenance plan for the next 10 years, and the dollars match perfectly, but we know we have more needs than what are on that plan, but by law, we can't put it on that plan. And I'm hoping that through continued lobbying with legislators, that to me, the public would want to know, how much are you planning over the next 10 years to take care of all your facilities? That, to me, if I were a taxpayer in a community, that's what I would want to know. So having said that, at this point in time, and as Vince said, we approve the plan now, and then we come back and we approve it again at the truth and taxation portion. Is that correct,
Well,
Kim?
the proposed levy, you're approving it again.
Again.
But you're only approving 1 year of that levy, 1 year of your 10-year plan. And then the final approval is in December.
So again, we're asking for your approval at this time.
I'll motion.
Second.
Any discussion? There's nothing about the long-term facilities maintenance plan that relates to pupil count, right?
There is, you
There is?
receive the revenue based on the pupil count.
What did you project? I'm just curious. What did you
Well,
predict 10 years out?
It's,
Double.
Good one.
because it will be adjusted. You know, you're, on the levies, you're always projecting the pupil, and you get the revenue based on the pupil units.
Yep.
But then 2 years down the line.
We
you'll
readjust.
have Adjustments
Yep.
to your levy
Yep.
based on actual. So you want to try to get close to what you had. But like for the levy that's going in, and this is for the 17-18 school year, the estimate was 4,775. And that's the weighted.
Oh, I see. It is
Yeah.
up there, okay.
Yeah.
Vince was asking how do you
How to
project
get the
10 years
10-year
out?
one,
Yeah,
not
what-
next year.
what number
the
did you
10-year.
use?
Oh, so then what we do for that is, you know, we do the 5-year projections in the fall. So I use those 5-year projections, and then after that, it's just the same number going out.
Yeah, so it's
So we're really-
4,628.
So we're really maybe over projecting,
Six, 7, 8, 9, and 10.
we're hoping our
all the same
enrollment's
number.
gonna stabilize.
Yeah. But the see, and the
Which
reason I
line are you
ask is
looking
because the
at?
demographic study that we had done
Which line are you looking
in
at?
2014
Yeah, line
projects
On the top
six.
page?
a continued decrease of
Yeah.
approximately
Oh, I see, I see.
65 students a
I can barely
year,
read that.
and that's not reflected in the pupil count.
Right, but it's only 1 year of the estimated pupil count that you're actually getting the revenue on.
Yeah, and what
So
you're
you
also
know-
saying, it's a rolling 10-year plan as well, right?
Right.
it's-
So next year will be
yeah.
a new number in the fall. Yep, okay. Sorry.
No.
Yep. Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Is it weird to try to figure out where the state's at on some of these things right now? Because in addition to the not having it online or whatever, the form, they don't seem to be finished with whatever they were doing.
Yeah, I think what happens is they come out of legislative session and they need some things to start rolling, and they're not staffed
Okay.
to keep up with it.
I wonder when Denny and Katie can retire. When
Maybe
does
they're
that?
volunteering now. You think it runs to the
That's as
beginning?
much fun as Andy's saying.
Begins to the next session?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm sure it's written in the rules somewhere.
I would bet it goes, they have to work right into that next session.
Next up, parking lots.
Yeah, we had 2 phases for our parking lots, 2 phases of bids. The first phase was seal coating, and then the second phase that occurred this afternoon at 2 o'clock was really, when you think of the high school, there's on the lower half, there's the teacher parking lot area on the lower half, and that needs to be totally dug up. And then there's a part at McCullough. They want to expand the turnaround just a little bit more, so that's some additional parking lot. Those are the 2 main pieces of the project. We're fortunate to get
We got 3 bids
3.
this time.
Huh?
We got 3 bids this time.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we were fortunate to get 3 competitive bids. And again, we're going to come in a little bit lower than what we had anticipated, which is good news. We're recommending bituminous roadways. And of course, we have other people who help us with this, who deal with parking lots. They do the background check then, and they tell us, you don't have to accept the low bid always. If it comes back that, that they're not done reputable work, you could say, well, we've heard that, and so we're not going to hire you. But David Ray sent us a letter this afternoon saying that they have worked with bituminous roadways before. He called the owner of the company then to make sure that, because they sit right here, and so they know what the other bids are. And they were about $44,000 below one bid. On a $203,000 bid, that's a lot. And he said, nope, that he understood the scope of the project and that they're standing behind their bid, and David Ray is standing behind them as a firm, so we're bringing forward then recommendation for you to accept it as a board.
Great. It's good news then,
Yes,
because you were contemplating holding off?
yes.
Yeah.
If it, I had
You
no
weren't
idea how
happy
many
with that
bids,
split bid?
I had no idea how many bids we were gonna get this time of year.
Did we get a motion yet?
I'll motion.
No, motion.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Next up, a motion to approve payment of the Dan Greil $5,000 professional goals incentive.
Is that left out of the agenda? I don't have that Dan Greil part in the agenda.
He sort of pushed for it.
I know.
To
Yeah,
this-
We have to give him credit every year.
I don't know that I'm giving him credit.
Might be liability.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been put in my contract a few years ago, professional goals incentive. And you as a board meet with me and talk about some goals that you set. And then it's this time of year that you say whether I've met them or not. And I met with 3 of the board members about a week or 2 ago, and so I'll let one of them share whether they believe I've met them or not.
Well, we met, myself, Joe and Scott, following that meeting. And I'm sorry, I should have had this up in front of me before we got to this line item. The 3 goals were, help me if I not remember them correctly, were about continuing to support the middle school as we try and optimize their educational services provided there, 5.8. Sort of systemizing Vision 2025.
Yeah.
Establishing a ongoing process for that, and drawing a blank on the other one.
It was the kindergarten.
Oh, kindergarten readiness.
Readiness.
That's right. Yeah,
Or-
strengthening our kindergarten readiness and improving our percentage of 4-year-olds that are prepared this time to enter kindergarten. Tim provided a good supporting documentation of the work that he had put into each of those goals, and we felt as a group that he had moved us forward on all of those items. And the Administrative Negotiating Committee does support the payment of those performance pay associated with the goals. And that was our committee's recommendation.
Thank you.
Somebody want to make the motion?
Make a motion.
I'll second it.
Any discussion?
Yeah, I just want to, thank the committee and Tim for making this real, to put some real work into this, make it real. I know that when this, as one of the historians here now on the board, one of the purposes of doing this at the time, we were trying to set kind of an example, and it was we'd have this in all the contracts, and in the teacher's contract, it would probably be in the form of some sort of Q count type of thing, which we can't even get into if we wanted to,
Right.
even anymore. And that part of it didn't occur, and so that's why I think that you deserve even more credit for keeping this thing really valid and real, even though that growth across the other contracts did not occur. So thank you.
Well, and to continue that strength, just to remind everybody of our timeline, in the August timeframe, we'll establish as a committee and then as our larger board the goals for the next year. And I feel like it's helpful to our board just to talk about organizationally, what do we think the key operative things are for the upcoming year, and I think that's very helpful. So keep that in your mind. We will be having that conversation in August with the goal of approving them in September.
Do you still, go ahead.
Well, so I'll just make one comment too. Austin, I don't know how you kept track of this stuff with, it's been a busy year. But I hope for next year's, and for your sake too, that we make them a little more measurable or easily to identify, specific standards, just, so we can say X, Y, Z happened and then, that we hit those things. But no, I agree with, recommending everything here this year, but I think it'll be easier next year to come back and say, okay, we have a little more cut and defined, here's what it is and here's what happened too. But I mean, that's our job as a board to come up with that, so.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and again, I'm sure Tim would be happy to make his supporting documentation that he made available to us, available to anybody else that
Yeah.
wanted to track that, because I do feel like it was This is not as subjective as it sounds for the purposes of this conversation, that there was a good amount of documentation supporting actual movement and numbers of students and that kind of thing.
All those in favor? Or any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Then a motion to approve 3 resignations.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. And then a leave.
I'll motion.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. And a termination.
I can make that motion.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. And new employment, custodian.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. We have a regular board meeting scheduled for July 20th. We do not have a July work session. And we need a motion to close the meeting for negotiations discussions.
I'll motion.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes, and then we'll go next door. And we won't come back, and we don't need you guys anymore. Thank you.
We have